If you're an intermediate level guitar player, here are 13 skills you should have. First, muting. For starters, you can mute with either hand. And if you don't know what muting is, it's when you mute the strings you're not using. For example, I can strum all the strings and make you only hear one. The way I'm able to do this is by using my left hand to mute the strings I'm not playing. All you have to do is slightly touch them. This is extremely common in funk guitar playing. You may have heard it in this tune. As an intermediate level guitar player, you should also be able to palm mute. It's a pretty easy technique. It's just muting with the right hand. To execute this technique, just rest your palm here and lightly touch the strings you're playing. The next technique we'll discuss is called a rake. In order to do this technique, you have to be comfortable muting with your right hand. Because if you're not, you won't be able to do it properly. And that's really gonna piss me off! But I'm not even mad. A rake is when you strum the strings in one single motion, but only play one of them. So if I wanted to play this note, a rake would look like this. Most of the time when you see someone do a rake, it's before they bend. Just make sure when you do a rake that you have the strings that you're not playing muted. Because if you don't mute them, it's gonna sound something like this. Next technique. This is bending. Most of you guys probably already have this one down, or at least you think you do. Plot twist! None of you can actually do this! The most comfortable way to bend the strings is to use this Hendrix-style grip with your thumb over the neck as such. Think if you were holding a baseball and what that would feel like. Then mimic this with your neck. In terms of the bending motion itself, think about moving your fingers like this. A common mistake intermediate guitar players make is bending using this motion instead. You'll find that first motion way easier. Staying on the topic of bends, next we'll look at pre-bends. A pre-bend is achieved when you bend up to your target note before you pick. So if my target note was B, then I would bend up to that note, then I would pick and release the bend. A pre-bend is 3 separate movements. Bend, pick, release. Let's hear some pre-bends in context. If you would like to have your improvisation professionally critiqued, consider signing up to the 52-week guitar player waiting list. But more on that later. Next, we're going to talk about cigarettes! Just kidding! We're actually going to talk about one more bending related skill, and that is unison bends. These are unison bends. A unison bend is where you play 2 notes and then bend the lower note up to the same pitch as the higher note, and therefore reaching perfect unison. A unison bend can also sometimes be referred to as a double stop bend. A double stop refers to playing 2 notes at the same time. This is where the term double stop bend comes from. Although you may see other people teaching double stop bends more like this. Unison bends are technically double stop bends, but not all double stop bends are unison bends. It's kind of like saying all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs.
Is that like all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs? Surprisingly, yes.
A common problem beginner players experience when bending is accidentally going underneath the strings and or pulling other strings back with them as they release the bends, resulting in unwanted string noise. If you're experiencing this problem, just quit! Nah, but in all seriousness, if you're experiencing this problem, I am very sorry to hear that. I really am. But unless you've practiced that bend 1,000 times, you get no sympathy from Brandon. Just stop making that mistake. Like, shit, man, I don't know what to tell you. Also, make sure when you bend that you're using multiple fingers to beef it up. Don't just use one finger like some sort of mentally disturbed lunatic. Next technique, sliding. This is sliding. Age reveal at 1 million subs. To execute a slide, simply pick a note, then move your fretting hand up or down that string. You may have also noticed during my demo that I slid into some bends. I would play a normal slide, but then I would bend the note that I slid to. Sliding into a bend is essentially a 3-part technique. Pick a note, slide into a second note, then bend into the third note. Now let's talk about hammer-ons and pull-offs. This is a hammer-on. This is a pull-off. Notice that I'm playing 2 notes, but I'm only picking once. This is because a hammer-on and a pull-off are exactly what they sound like. For a hammer-on, you bring your finger down hard to fret the note. Whereas with a pull-off, you're pulling the string slightly as you lift your finger. Be careful not to make the mistake of playing hammer-ons with flat fingers, like this. Use the tips of your fingers instead. And if your pull-offs sound weak, be careful that you're not making the mistake of just lifting your fingers like this. That's not gonna work, and you're stupid if you keep doing that. Instead, the motion is sort of a flick. Make sure you're squeezing the string hard enough that you can do this. If you're a fucking noob, try playing along with me here. Also, in case it wasn't obvious, it's implied that you have your guitar in your hands when you watch my content. Check this out! By the way, if you would like to get that backing track along with 26 other amazing tracks, they are available for purchase for only $1. That's not $1 per track, by the way. That's $1 for all 27. I will be raising the price on that soon though, so make sure you go ahead and grab that now. Once you get good with hammer-ons and pull-offs, you can then graduate to trills. To play a trill, simply do this. The speed can vary, but as long as you're playing 2 notes back and forth, you're playing a trill. Dave Murray from Iron Maiden loves trills. Overall, trills are a pretty easy technique, and they're pretty flashy. Once you get good at trills, you can graduate to tapping, which is even flashier. This guitar technique is sexy as hell. If you're one of those people that are really concerned with what others think of you, then make sure to show your tapping skills off to them. They'll think you're really good at guitar, even though you're just average. Tapping requires both hands. This is a technique that has been around for a super long time, but it's often associated with Eddie Van Halen. When it comes to tapping, there are multiple levels of difficulty to it. If we're just using 2 fingers, it's quite easy. Some people prefer to tap with their index finger like this. But I personally prefer to tap with my middle finger. If you don't have experience with this technique, then you're gonna notice the fingers on your right hand will develop blisters. If this becomes a problem for you, there's a super easy way to fix it. It's called not being a pussy bitch. As I've said, there are levels to tapping. If you want to step up in difficulty, give this riff a shot. Did you notice the time signature? That's what makes that riff challenging. It's called Electric Sunrise by Pliny. It's an excellent / modern track that uses tapping. Intermediate level guitar players should be able to play bar chords. If you can't do this, then you are not an intermediate guitar player. And if you think playing F is hard, practice this. Once you practice that enough, F is gonna feel like a walk in the park. Sometimes students ask me about ways to increase their grip strength. Well, I think practicing bar chords is probably the best way to get better at playing bar chords. Perhaps you'd be interested in some deadlifts instead. Fun fact, that lift was 2.41 times my body weight. So if you weigh 170 pounds, that would be like lifting 410 pounds for 3 reps. Next, let's talk about tremolo picking, or tremolo picking. I typically say tremolo, but some people have made fun of me for that. Motherfucker, it's pronounced differently depending on your geography. I live in Canada. For God's sake, just don't say arpeggios if you mean arpeggios. There's a special place in hell for people like that. Anyway, this is tremolo picking. Tremolo picking is a pretty easy technique since you're only playing fast on one string at a time. When you have to continue playing fast but also switch strings, that's when it becomes difficult and no longer an intermediate technique. You don't often hear me play acoustic, but another intermediate technique is fingerpicking. Fingerpicking can obviously range in difficulty, but here are a few songs I would classify as intermediate in terms of fingerpicking level. Now let's talk about the final skill on the list. Being able to improvise over simple harmony. There's levels to improvisation just like there's levels to fingerpicking, tapping, etc. But when it comes to simple harmony that stays in the same key, I'm talking chords like G, C, D, and E minor, intermediate guitar players shouldn't struggle too much with this. Will intermediate guitar players be stuck in one place on the fretboard as they improvise? Probably. Will your solo sound like shit? Well, hopefully not. Will you still be ugly? Of course. But if you can improvise a solo that sounds something like this, you have my seal of approval, and I would classify you as an intermediate level guitar player. Check it out. If you'd like to know what skill level you are specifically, consider enrolling in 52-Week Guitar Player. 52-Week Guitar Player is an online guitar program that I created in 2019. In this program, you will receive structure, feedback, practice routines, accountability, live interaction with pros, and big fun in the sun. Unlike every other guitar course on the internet, 52-Week Guitar Player is personalized. We still have an organized lesson curriculum to solve your problem of having no structure, but as you go through it and do the practice routines, you will receive personalized feedback in video form from a professional. This is guaranteed in 52-Week Guitar Player. Grab your spot on the waiting list. The link will be in the description. Just check out what these other students had to say. And this video on the website will have more information. I have nothing left to say. Now just leave!